The CIO went ahead with another enforced summons attempt for the detained president, but failed again as the president continues to refuse such calls. Its search and seizure operation targeting the presidential office and the residents on the same day was also unsuccessful. The number of births in November posted the highest growth in 14 years, raising hope amid a chronically low birth rate. On his second day in office, U.S. President Donald Trump says he is considering a 10% tariff on China starting February, blaming the inflow of fentanyl into America. It's January 22nd, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jong-min. We start at the Seoul Detention Center, where President Yoon continues to refuse to take part in questioning sessions led by anti-corruption investigators. We have our Lee Soo-jin standing by. Soo-jin, I understand a third attempt was made to take him in by investigators to no end.
Right, the CIO had moved forward with another 4 summons today, and this marks the third such attempt. And just like you said, the CIO announced hours earlier that this third attempt also ended unsuccessfully. A CIO vehicle was seen entering the main gates of the Seoul Detention Center, where I'm currently at 10:20 a.m. today. The CIO had considered 2 options: forcibly transferring Yoon to the CIO interrogation room at the government complex in Gwacheon, or carrying out on-site interviews in an investigation room at the detention center. But Yoon refused to comply with either as he continued to sit in consultations with his lawyers. The agency is continuously making these efforts as there isn't much time before the CIO has to hand Yoon's case over to prosecutors before the detention period expires on the 28th.
Separately, I hear anti-corruption officials also launched a search and seize operation today.
Yes, the CIO began a search and seizure operation at both Yoon's residence and the presidential office today, both located at the Yongsan-gu district and central Seoul. But these operations also ended in failure at both locations. The CIO had attempted to secure encrypted phone records, meeting minutes, as well as computers. Yoon is currently facing allegations using an encrypted phone to order top police and military officials to command troops to remove lawmakers from the National Assembly during his brief imposition of martial law. But the search and seizure operations once again face challenges from the Presidential Security Service, which had blocked previous such attempts. The CIO announced that the Presidential Security Service decided to not approve the execution of the search warrants for the presidential office at around 3 p.m. And the CIO suspended the execution of the warrant at the president's residence at around 4:50 p.m.
And what has been the response from the president's side?
So Yoon's lawyers have steadfastly maintained their stance of refusing to comply with CIO investigations. They have said that as they plan to attend all the impeachment hearings, including the one that's happening tomorrow, they needed time to prepare. His team also added that as they will say all that needs to be said at these hearings and call these attempts, quote, a violation of human rights. Here's what an expert I talked to today said on the refusal to comply with the CIO investigations.
I believe President Yoon is avoiding CIO investigations for 3 reasons: to rally his supporters, to delay the investigation process, and to delay the impeachment trial.
That's all I have. Back to you, Jong-min.
Since the president's martial law declaration almost 2 months ago, tensions and feud have only grown within the political circles. To delve deeper into the standoff, let's turn to our political correspondent, Shin Ha-young. Ha-young, the first hearing of the National Assembly's Special Committee to investigate the Yoon administration's alleged insurrection plan took place today. What were the takeaways?
Well, the first thing that we need to take a look at is the issuance of orders to bring key officials, including President Yoon to the hearings as witnesses. And President Yoon and former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun, who were requested to appear at the National Assembly to answer lawmakers' questions, did not show up to the hearing today. And in response, the opposition-led committee issued orders to bring Yoon and 6 other military officials to the Assembly as witnesses.
We are issuing an order for 7 witnesses, including Yoon Suk-yeol. Please carry them out.
The ruling People Power Party criticized the opposition for trying to embarrass the president. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo and former Interior Minister Lee Sang-min attended the hearing, but Lee continued to refuse to answer questions. And at the hearing, the opposition focused on verifying allegations that President Yoon denied during yesterday's impeachment trial, while the ruling party argued that the CIO's insurrection investigation and Yoon's detention were unlawful. Take a listen.
Without legal grounds, how can the CIO conduct illegal investigations and claim the Presidential Security Service acted unlawfully? Deputy Chief, you should respond firmly.
And as we just saw, President Yoon refuses investigations, but he did attend his impeachment trial yesterday at the Constitutional Court. What could have been the reasons behind this?
Well, first of all, it was an unprecedented moment as Yoon became the first president to attend his own impeachment trial. And previously, Yoon had said he would attend the trial but skip the first 2 hearings, citing security and protocol reasons. And experts say that there were concerns he could be arrested upon arrival, as an outstanding warrant hadn't been executed at that time. However, the situation changed after another arrest warrant seeking a longer period of detention was issued. And unlike other investigations, impeachment hearings are public, and by attending, Yoon seems to want to show his supporters he's strong, while also emphasizing the unfairness of the impeachment. And some even interpret this as an attempt to sway public opinion. And as Yoon's legal team stated, the president will attend the hearing at the Constitutional Court again tomorrow. So this is another point to watch for on Thursday.
And lawmakers are clashing over a bill for a special investigation into the president's brief imposition of martial law. How has the situation been unfolding?
Well, all eyes were on whether there would be room for negotiations over the bill, but the political strife only intensified. An opposition-led revised bill to launch a special counsel investigation into President Yoon's short-lived imposition of martial law was passed by a National Assembly plenary session on Friday. And this came after rival party floor leaders failed to reach an agreement on the bill during negotiations. And instead, the DP revised its own version of the bill and brought it to a vote. The bill that passed excludes allegations of inducement of foreign aggression and focuses on 6 specific allegations compared to the 11 outlined in the original version. And instead, the DP added a provision allowing the special counsel to investigate so-called related cases, not just Yoon's declaration of martial law. And regarding this, the ruling party opposed the revised bill, arguing that its vague provisions could allow investigations into accusations not originally listed, including those previously removed. And one factor we also need to take a close look at is that the investigation appears to be losing momentum after Yoon transitioned from a temporary detainee to a criminal suspect on insurrection charges. So since overlapping investigations are not allowed, the special prosecutor would be unable to charge Yoon with insurrection. And the PPP argues that the bill is unnecessary because most key figures, including President Yoon, have already been arrested or indicted. The DP, on the other hand, claimed that it had incorporated the PPP's demands and argued and urged the acting president to approve the bill immediately, warning that any delay would prolong the insurrection. And acting President Choi Sang-mok has until February 2nd to either approve or reject a bill, and if rejected, it will be returned to the Assembly for a revote. And he is expected to decide after the Lunar New Year holiday or Seollal.
Right, it's a complicated issue and we'll have to keep a close eye on that. Thank you for the report.
My pleasure.
In other news, findings for the month of November show a substantial surge in the number of newborns, posting the highest growth in 14 years. Jong covers the latest data.
Last November saw the country's biggest rise in births in 14 years. According to Statistics Korea, the number of births in November last year was at just over 20,000, up 2,500 births, or 14.6% from a year earlier. This is the highest growth rate since November 2010, when it reached over 17% growth. The number of births has exceeded 20,000 for 5 consecutive months after surpassing that mark in July. And increases were witnessed for November in every province and administrative division of the country. If the current trend continues until December, the annual number of births is expected to see a positive rebound for the first time in 9 years.
The increase in the number of births seems to be influenced by a prior increase in marriages. The rise in marriages between August 2022 and the first quarter of 2023 might have contributed to the subsequent rise in births.
In November, there were over 18,500 marriages, marking the highest number in 9 years and an increase of 11%. During the same month, there were more than 29,000 deaths, resulting in a decline in the natural population of 9,000. Jong, Arirang News.
Over in the U.S., President Trump says he is considering a 10% tariff on China starting February, seen as part of his effort to, quote, put America first. Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
U.S. President Donald Trump continues to threaten other countries with tariffs, this time targeting China. On Tuesday at the Oval Office, Trump said he is considering a 10% tariff on China starting as early as February 1st, citing that too much fentanyl is coming into the U.S. from China via Mexico and Canada.
Thinking about that too, we're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada.
This comes after Trump on Monday threatened 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, accusing them of allowing undocumented migrants and drugs to come into the U.S. Meanwhile, Trump announced investment plans worth $500 billion to build artificial intelligence infrastructure in the country. And as part of such efforts, OpenAI, SoftBank, and Oracle are planning a joint venture called Stargate. During Trump's briefing, SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son, along with Sam Altman of OpenAI and Larry Ellison of Oracle, joined the president. $100 billion in funding has been committed for now, with more expected over the next 4 years. Ellison said 10 data centers for the project are under construction in Texas, with more to come in other states.
Each building's 500,000 square feet. There are 10 buildings currently being built, but that will expand to 20.
And Trump says this project will create hundreds and thousands of jobs.
In the future, a new American company that will invest $500 billion at least in AI infrastructure in the United States and very, very quickly, moving very rapidly, creating over 100,000 American jobs almost immediately.
Meanwhile, when asked about whether he's open to Elon Musk buying TikTok, Trump said he would be if he wanted to buy it. He previously had directed the Justice Department on Monday to pause the enforcement of the TikTok ban for 75 days until early April, after TikTok became unusable in the U.S. Trump suggested to TikTok that the United States jointly owns half the company.
With a permit, it's worth like $1 trillion. So what I'm thinking about saying to somebody is buy it and give half to the United States of America, half, and we'll give you the permit.
Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
A Korean-American official, Jong-un, has been appointed to a key post at the Pentagon and will be in charge of crafting policies toward South Korea, Japan, and other East Asian countries under the Trump administration. Announcing a list of new officials that were sworn in, the U.S. Department of Defense said No is now the new Deputy Assistant Defense Secretary for East Asia. Until recently, he served as the Deputy General Counsel for the U.S. House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. Meanwhile, speculation is mounting about prospects of fresh engagement between Trump and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. For more on such prospects, our Oh Soo-young had a chance to talk to a former U.S. envoy to the six-party nuclear talks.
Seoul and Washington could aim for small but meaningful steps towards denuclearizing North Korea in a possible small deal under the new Trump administration. Former U.S. intelligence official Joseph Detrani told Arirang News he sees potential for a revival of top-level talks between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un after the Hanoi summit in 2019 broke down, which showed that Kim was not ready for a big deal to close down all his nuclear facilities. Ambassador Detrani was Washington's special envoy to the six-party talks that aimed to negotiate with North Korea 2 decades ago.
In regards to what sort of a process could be used to better engage with North Korea, well, I think we learned from Hanoi that the Libya model, where we expect North Korea to put everything on the table, is unrealistic. It's not going to happen. And I think we knew this from the six-party talks with North Korea going back to 2005 with the joint statement. It's actions for actions. As North Korea gets certain benefits, they will start to dismantle their nuclear weapons programs.
Despite Kim Jong-un's reported disappointment and anger over the failed talks, Detrani said the potential lifting of economic sanctions for smaller concessions could draw him back to negotiations.
This hasn't been put on the table before, but ideally stop the production of fissile material for nuclear weapons. I mean, these are all moves in the right direction. Now, is North Korea going to give up their arsenal of nuclear weapons? No. And Kim Jong-un has made that very clear. But our goal should be, and I think will be, the complete verifiable dismantlement of all nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons facilities. And that should continue to be our goal.
Detrani stressed the importance of reaching even small deals to freeze North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile development, especially as the regime last year forged a comprehensive strategic partnership with Russia, which includes mutual defense in times of war, and experts fear a potential transfer of key missile and nuclear technologies.
The assessment, at least in the United States, is reportedly that they can miniaturize their nuclear warheads, and they could make them to these short-range, intermediate-range, long-range ballistic missiles. What they could be getting from Russia is more work on their hypersonics, because the hypersonic, that's why they're working on that, is capable of defeating, in theory, missile defense systems, which is very, very important, but also MIRVing them, where they have multiple reentry vehicles, where they have multiple reentry, if you will, nuclear warheads, where you can have one missile, an ICBM, like the Hwasong 19, carrying 5 to 6 nuclear warheads that could be independently maneuvered to strike different targets.
While the South Korean president's suspension from office has hindered top-level diplomacy with Washington, Detrani says the bilateral alliance will likely remain robust due to such challenges, among other security issues in the Indo-Pacific region, particularly as Washington continues to counter China's growing influence. The ambassador added it is highly unlikely the US would formally recognize North Korea as a nuclear state, as that could potentially trigger distrust among US allies and an arms race in the region. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Quite a number of young Korean scholars have chosen to further broaden their academic horizons by seeking studies in the U.S. So how does Mr. Trump's return to the White House look to affect their plans? Our Yoon takes a look.
Now that Donald Trump is back in office, what does his second term mean for South Korean students in the U.S.? Is it an emerging challenge or possibly a new opportunity? The latest data shows that there are over 45,000 Korean students in the U.S., ranking third in terms of the largest international student populations following China and India. Given Trump's first term, America First immigration policies, which focused on stricter visa rules and limiting post-graduation work opportunities, there are concerns about the impact on Korean students. However, there may also be areas of focus that could open new pathways for international students in fields like technology, engineering, and research. A STEM visa is commonly used to refer to visa options available for those pursuing degrees in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields, including the F1 student visa with additional work opportunities. A recent graduate from grad school in data science in 2024 and currently working in the United States, Kim Gyu-hyun, gives us more details.
It's a policy that benefits the United States mostly. Of course, individuals working in the United States can also benefit, but it's a policy to retain talent in the country. So I don't think it'll be in the best interest of anyone to cancel or revoke the STEM OPT or H-1B policy. But I do think that it might be less friendlier than before, in that it'll be more selective of who gets the STEM visa.
In June 2024, while running for president, Donald Trump proposed to offer green cards to international students who graduate from American schools. This could be a potential game changer for those looking to build their futures in the United States. But with over 1 million international students in the U.S., questions remain.
He claimed it will be implemented right after taking office, but many experts are skeptical about its feasibility due to the scale of the proposal. There are doubts about whether Trump and his current team can actually make it happen.
The professor also added that although Korean students in the United States may not be directly affected for now, under the Trump administration, it's likely that the overall environment in American society could become more unwelcoming for international students.
Visa policies and restrictions could add an extra layer of complexity for international students like me, but I see these challenges as an opportunity to refine my strategies and explore alternative pathways.
While the direct impact on international students may not be immediate, the shifting atmosphere in American society could present new challenges, making it important to stay adaptable and prepared for any changes ahead. Yoon, Arirang News.
Ultrafine dust fills the air for a third in a row. Here in Seoul, ultrafine dust advisories have been issued with bad levels of ultrafine dust. As more fine dust from overseas gradually flows in, the air quality is expected to worsen. In this milder weather, fine dust will continue until the weekend all over the country. Dust will fill the skies in most areas with bad levels of ultrafine dust tomorrow. Please make sure to wear a protective mask when you go out. Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Gyeongju will start off at -2 degrees Celsius, Daegu at -1 degree. Daily highs will move up to 7 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon. Daejeon will reach 10 degrees. There's more rain or snow forecast between Friday night and Saturday along the East Coast. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. And that is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1. Find a seat. Before ordering, find a seat. Laptop ID, smartphone, jacket, whatever that can mark your territory. But no bites. It's a little too big. Step 2. Pick up. We do not ask or call your name. We call out, B69번 고객님. The buzzer will vibrate when your order is ready at the counter. Wait, got your straw? Keep the top of the wrapper on. Doing this is more hygienic. Step 3. Cafe etiquette. If you need to use your laptop, find a seat next to a socket. No extra charge for using electricity. But if you're staying over 3 hours, how about ordering another drink or dessert? Step 4. Last bite standing. There's a mysterious custom in Korea. The last bite standing. When there's about 1 bite left of that cake, nobody will go for it. You might be tempted, but don't be hasty. Right before you get up, take the last piece saying that you simply can't waste food, or just leave it. It will save a few calories. Did you survive at the cafe? Did someone behind the counter catch your eye? Go for the same drink every single day.
오늘도 아이스 말차 라떼 드실 거죠?
You might make an impression.
제가 사기꾼 같아요?
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring you today's most pressing issues from across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. With Donald Trump's return to the White House, the world is bracing for big changes to the global landscape. As for the Korean Peninsula, all eyes are on whether the American leader's policies on North Korea's denuclearization remain solid. Following his inauguration, Trump referred to North Korea as a nuclear power and spoke about his positive relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He also emphasized that he and Kim got along well, expressing confidence that Kim would be pleased with his return to the Oval Office. Now, following a period of high-stakes diplomacy and direct engagement with North Korea during his first term, experts are closely watching whether Trump's approach will evolve or face new challenges given shifting regional and global dynamics. Today, we explore what lies ahead for U.S. policy in dealing with North Korea and its broader implications for the global security. And for this, we invite Patrick Cronin, Asia-Pacific Security Chair at the Hudson Institute. Welcome, Dr. Cronin.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Brian Myers, Professor of International Studies at Dongsa University. Thank you for coming on, Professor.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So let's start a discussion with Dr. Cronin. During his first term, like I said, President Trump's approach to North Korea was marked by high-stakes diplomacy and direct engagement with Kim Jong-un. Do you think this style of engagement would prove effective again, or do you foresee new challenges given the current situation in his second term?
Well, I don't think maximum pressure will be the initial approach of the second Trump administration towards North Korea. But I do think direct engagement is still the style that President Trump prefers. And every indication is here on even day 3 of his administration, this second term, is that he's essentially hinted at an invitation for re-engagement with leader Kim Jong-un. You've already referred to the nuclear power comment, the indication that he has a good rapport with Kim Jong-un. He inquired about his health, said he was concerned about his well-being. All of those would suggest that Trump wants to re-engage with the North Korean leader. And he has now a special missions envoy in Rick Grinnell. He has a Secretary of State in place who's interested in North Korea. He has a Deputy National Security Advisor in Alex Wong who's used to back channels. So there are lines of communication that seem to be already opening.
Mm-hmm. U.S. Secretary of State nominee Marco Rubio recently acknowledged the failure of sanctions in curbing North Korea's nuclear development and emphasized the need for a new approach. And Dr. Cronin just mentioned maximum pressure won't be happening again. Professor Myers, what about you? How do you gauge the potential for a drastic shift in Washington's policies?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Dr. Cronin. I see a lot of potential there. Donald Trump and the U.S. foreign policy establishment, the so-called blob or deep state, they disagree about a lot of countries. But when it comes to North Korea, they see pretty much eye to eye. The State Department has kind of always advocated a soft line approach to North Korea. So during Trump's first term, it supported his outreach to Pyongyang. It was, in fact, urging him to make bolder concessions to Kim Jong-un than the National Security Council wanted Trump to make. Of course, in the end, the Hanoi summit fell apart 6 years ago, but both Trump and the State Department, I think, remain very optimistic that a settlement can be reached. The problem, as I see it, of course, is Ukraine. I don't see how Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un can negotiate a deal so long as North Korean soldiers are still fighting with the Russians against Ukraine. And I think the American public considers an end to that war to be much more urgent than a peace settlement with Kim Jong-un.
Right. So we'll touch upon the Ukraine issue as we speak. But let's circle back to the nuclear power statement by Trump. Professor, U.S. President Trump described North Korea as a nuclear power on Inauguration Day, and this comes after controversy has spurred over similar remarks by his Defense Secretary nominee, Pete Hegseth. Though this differs from the term nuclear armed state, this remark sparked controversy over a potential shift in Washington's stance on the non-proliferation treaty. What are the chances?
Well, again, the U.S. foreign policy elite has been saying for years now in op-ed pieces in major newspapers that it's time to come to terms with North Korea's nuclear capability. The sanctions aren't working. We need to live with it. So if Trump and his team are now striking the same notes, I think that raises the likelihood of some sort of arrangement being reached, perhaps one couched in terms that would save face for the United States, say by allowing for very rigorous inspections and verifications, or by laying out a plan for a very gradual disarmament. I would agree with Dr. Cronin that it would be very difficult for America formally to recognize North Korea as a nuclear state. A few other countries, though, have nuclearized outside the NPT framework, like India and Israel. The problem with North Korea is that it's an enemy of the United States who has nuclearized. So I think any sort of settlement would have to be reached in the context of a very dramatic change in the entire relationship between the two countries. And I'm skeptical, but Donald Trump loves a challenge. And I think once the Ukraine issue is resolved, North Korea could well become one of his top foreign policy priorities.
Right, so we'll have to really see what happens after this Ukraine issue is resolved. Now, what about you, Dr. Cronin? Some people say that Trump may want to seek a small deal with North Korea, which means a freeze of its nuclear programs in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. How likely is this scenario?
Well, we're sort of jumping out to an end state that is somewhat fantastical at this point. I think we have to start and restart negotiations first. I think neither President Trump nor Kim Jong-un is particularly interested in small deals. At least they wouldn't sell it that way. So while I agree with everything Professor Myers said, and I agree with what Ambassador Detrani said earlier, in terms of talking about the idea of a fissile freeze, material freeze, as being a kind of a small step that could be a significant step in U.S.-North Korean relations. I just don't think the negotiations will start off with this. I think this could be a first step of a product of negotiation, and maybe it gets stalled at that point, or maybe that's as far as I can go. But I don't think small deals is sort of what Trump is thinking about. He may delegate this, though, to his administration to say, if you can negotiate a way to contain the North Korean issue so I can get on with my U.S.-China contest, I could see him doing that. So we'll have to see whether a small deal is the result of an engagement. But first, we have to get through the engagement. We have to re-engage, and that's really what's on the table right now.
Right, resuming talks actually is pretty much difficult and important at this point. Now, Professor Myers, how do you see chances of Trump jumping on North Korean issues during his first few months? You mentioned Ukraine a while ago. How much of a priority do you think the denuclearization issue would be?
Well, there's this very weird logic in American media and think tanks for the past few years, according to which America shouldn't really worry much about Russia's nuclear weapons because Putin wouldn't dare to attack America no matter what America does to Russia through its Ukrainian proxy. But the danger of North Korea launching a nuclear strike out of the blue is so great, we've just got to start negotiating with Kim Jong-un as soon as possible. And that's never made much sense to me. And it won't make much sense, I think, either to the American people or to Donald Trump. He's going to want to wrap up that proxy war first, if he really is worried about the risk of a nuclear war. And that will likely take months. Besides which, this is an America First president for whom domestic problems are bound to take precedence for a while. Plus, Kim Jong-un doesn't want to come running, at America's first call. He's going to want to play hard to get for a while. So I would be very surprised if negotiations were even attempted before this summer.
Now, what about from North Korea's perspective, Dr. Cronin? Given Trump's history of direct engagement with Kim, do you believe North Korea would be willing to return to the negotiating table under the second administration? And what factors would influence the regime's decision to engage diplomatically with the U.S. again?
Well, I think in principle, Kim Jong-un should want to probe what President Trump is willing to do, including what he means by nuclear power. But as Professor Myers pointed out, there are some significant obstacles in the way this first half of 2025. And I agree, the Russia-Ukraine negotiations, whatever happens on that war, is really of paramount importance. And until that's cleared, it's hard to imagine the North Korean negotiation being really ripe for talks. But it really does come down to Kim Jong-un being interested. He spurned the Biden and Yoon administrations on diplomacy. Clearly, Trump is a different flavor, and maybe the South Korean government that could be coming and changing in this year would also open up the prospects that would invite diplomacy in the latter half of 2025.
Now, South Korea had been concerned about not being involved in the decision-making process if Trump's move forward with this direct engagement strategy with North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un agrees to do that. Now, since Seoul currently has a leadership vacancy, as we all know, with the ongoing impeachment trial against President Yoon Suk-yeol, what can it do to ensure its interests are protected, Professor Myers?
Well, South Koreans are, of course, right to worry. We know that Donald Trump generally believes that the South Koreans can and should defend themselves. So I don't think he's going to let concern for South Korea's security get in the way of a deal that he thinks is going to be really great for the United States. Now, Donald Trump did not get along very well with President Moon Jae-in during his first term, but there had been hopes here in South Korea that he might bond a little bit better with President Yoon, perhaps on the golf course. The two men both play golf. That's obviously not going to happen, at least not in the short term. On the other hand, again, it will likely be summer or at least, maybe even autumn or winter before Trump can really turn his attention to North Korea. And by that time, I'm sure we all hope, that this current leadership crisis will have been resolved some way or another. And whoever is leading South Korea then, I'm sure, will advocate actively for this country's interests with the White House.
Right, so we'll have to hope for the turmoil to end before Trump focuses on the nuclearization issue. Now, North Korea's state media on Friday reported on the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol's detention by the South Korea's anti-corruption agency on the martial law imposition. Now, since November, the regime has often been updating its people on the situation here in South Korea, especially on the anti-Yoon rallies. Professor, how would you read into this? Aren't they supposed to be concerned about their public being shocked over, democratic activities of South Korean citizens?
I don't think so, Mo-kyun. The North Koreans have been seeing photographs and footage of demonstrating South Koreans for the past 40 or 50 years. They were fully informed about the impeachment of Park Geun-hye. And if that didn't have a subversive effect on public opinion in the North, the news of President Yoon's detention is not likely to shake them up very much either. What you and I may regard as signs of a robust, pluralist democracy at work, as a display of free speech, are seen in the context of North Korea's culture as evidence of a really disgraceful chaos and disunity. And that in turn is seen as the result of a leader failing to command love and respect the way that Kim Jong-un does. When you talk to older North Korean refugees and you ask them how they reacted to this kind of news when they were up there, they'll tell you that the subversive effect came more from seeing how well-dressed people were, how nice the buildings in Seoul looked. But the regime now chooses its images quite carefully. So I don't think this is going to have much of a subversive or destabilizing effect on North Korean public opinion at all.
Mm-hmm. Now, in a recent report, Kim Jong-un reportedly sent a New Year's letter to encourage and express gratitude to its troops deployed to fight for Russia in its war against Ukraine. Dr. Cronin, how much longer do you think this troop support for Russia would continue by North Korea?
Well, I think Kim Jong-un really prizes this new revitalized alliance with Russia. This is providing new revenue streams for him, new prestige, power and leverage he can use with China, the United States, and others. Every indication is that he's willing to send in, or is already in the pipeline of sending in, another 10,000 troops to fight in Russia's war against Ukraine. So I think as long as that fight is going on, Kim Jong-un is going to use this new relationship with Russia to the max. And we'll have to see whether diplomacy starts to lead to a ceasefire and the troops start to come home. But at this point, commercial overhead imagery, for instance, shows on a regular basis that there's active port activity of trade on energy and potentially arms going back and forth between Russia and North Korea. So this is a strong relationship at the moment, and I expect Kim Jong-un to use it because it is leverage for him for when he does re-engage with the United States or when he does engage China. This factor really provides him that kind of balance of power that he seeks.
Right, so we're seeing thousands of people going to Ukraine, and I just want to ask if North Korea really has more room for resources to do that.
Well, they have troops, and they can send troops, and they're under Russian command, and the Russians are using them with changing their tactics day by day, depending on how they see the interaction of the fighting, apparently. Right now, the Russians may have pulled them back a bit, but that's only because they're waiting to assess maybe the diplomacy, if there is diplomacy, with the Trump administration.
So we'll have to see how that goes. Now, meanwhile, in another news, South Korea has announced the development of a low-altitude missile defense system akin to Israel's Iron Dome to better counter North Korea's long-range artillery threats. Professor Myers, what's the background behind this development, and what could this latest technology be capable of?
Well, there's been talk of the need for something like this for quite some time, and the South Koreans have looked kind of enviously at Israel's famous Iron Dome. So what is planned here is also a kind of ground-based surface-to-air system that would use radar to detect incoming rockets and artillery and fire missiles to intercept or attack them. Now, this won't be cheap, of course, and while the Americans did much of the funding for Israel's Iron Dome, I think the burden for South Korea's version of it is going to fall squarely on the taxpayers here. And yet, I think developing such a system makes good sense for a country, half of whose population is within the range, even of quite short-range North Korean artillery. Of course, such a dome would never be foolproof. These systems are vulnerable to saturation strikes, for example. But I think it would be a step in the right direction. And the present time is a bit like the 1970s in South Korea, in that, the Americans, the alliance is not as reliable as it might have looked at other times. And I think the South Koreans do need to start taking more of their defense into their own hands. And this is, a step in the right direction.
Right, then it's a good news for South Korea. Well, as North Korea continues to enhance its missile capabilities and cyber warfare abilities, Dr. Cronin, how do you assess the effectiveness of current international sanctions and diplomatic efforts to contain these advancements?
Well, not that effective based on North Korea's results, but that's mostly because the Russia and China support at the UN Security Council is no longer a factor, and Kim Jong-un has broken that regime, and as a result, it makes it a lot easier for North Korea to get, obviously, not just from China, but from Russia in particular right now, the kind of military technology that it seeks for its programs, and that could be aiding its missile programs, its military satellite programs, and it makes it very difficult for democratic states to try to stop that when you've got major powers like China and Russia openly supporting North Korea.
Right. So, do you think, and do you have any suggestions on how to, further contain these advancements?
Sure. Diplomacy is a good start, and I think, let's start with the war in Ukraine. Maybe that will help open up some new doors with Russia. Clearly, President Trump is interested in engaging Xi Jinping. Maybe that'll open up some new prospects there for cooperation. We'll see. Let's make sure that South Korea gets an electoral mandate for its government so that we have a strong ally in Seoul coordinating with us and working with us on this diplomacy. And let's keep Japan engaged as well and actively supporting non-proliferation. All of these things will be steps in this year that could be strengthened.
Right, so combined diplomacy is the key. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your insights tonight. We will have to leave our discussion right here. Again, many thanks to Professor Myers and Dr. Cronin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now, that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
Hi, Chef Ryan here. Today we're going to make hwangtae tang, a dried pollock soup